right, so thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Kim McCarthy. I am the founder of Greene County Voices, one of the groups involved today. And also, as of 4 days ago, I am also the chairman of the Greene County Democratic Party. Transitioning. This collaboration today started back in 2020 after the racial justice uprisings drove many local residents to step up and demand change. 4 different groups here in Greene County alone. People from Bellbrook Sugarcreek, Beaver Creek, Fairborn, and Yellow Springs decided that they want to see something better here in our county. And here they are, 2 years later, still pushing forward. So with that, I'd like to thank and welcome my co-hosts, Citizens for a Better Beaver Creek, Inclusive Fairborn, Sugarcreek Cares, and YS Speaking Up for Justice. So a round of applause for those guys for all the work for today. With terrorist acts like Buffalo continuing to threaten our way of life, we must not take our foot off the pedal. Our country is going through massive shifts right now, and we can't allow these changes to be driven by people who think that the color of their skin makes them more deserving of a life with dignity than others. So we are here today to support you in your work, motivate you for the future, and to help you intentionally build the kinds of communities you want to see. So I'd firstly like to do a land acknowledgement. I want to recognize that we as Greene County residents are standing on Shawnee, Miami, and their ancestors' unceded traditional lands. I'd also like to acknowledge the elected officials in the room, Tanner Stanton from Fairborn City Council, Clint Allen, also from Fairborn City Council. And he's not exactly elected, but he's a leader in our community, Doug Kozad, superintendent of Bellbrook Sugarcreek Schools. And I hope I didn't miss anyone. There's lots of masks here. I think I got everyone. All right, so just a little housekeeping. You can see the food and drinks over there. There's bathrooms out through the door. Please wear your mask as much as you can, and you have a program there that details what's going to happen this morning. So just one more thing about this space. We want to value everyone's voice, so we ask that you be respectful in your interactions with others here today. So we just passed the 2nd anniversary of George Floyd's murder. Our hearts may still feel heavy over this injustice, but there has been some accountability, but there is no justice when we cannot bring him and countless other lives back. But we can let our hearts be filled with hope as we celebrate these groups here today, 2 years of organizing against systematic racism here in Greene County. So that's something to be proud of. And we're going to learn some of what life has been like here in Greene County over the decades as seen through that lens of racial justice. So we're here to learn from our past and our present, and this will help us create a better future for us all. So now it's time for our short opening ceremony. It's going to feature a passage by Bill Plotkin, and it's going to be read by Lexi Presnell of Sugarcreek. You're coming. There you go.
The gift you carry the world is not an attempt to save the world, but to fully belong to it. It is not possible to save the world by trying to save it. You need to find what is genuinely yours to offer the world before you can make it a better place. Discovering your unique gift to bring to your community is the greatest opportunity and challenge. The offering of that gift, your true self, is the most you can do to love and serve the world, and it is all the world needs.
All right, slide 2, Denise. So we are going to begin our program today with a story from our past, 1964 to be precise. Well, the years around that as well. So I welcome Meredith Briniger from Sugarcreek Cares to the stage to introduce our special guest, Mr. Paul Graham of Yellow Springs, to share this story with us. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Meredith Brenniger, and I am the chair of Sugarcreek Cares, one of the co-sponsors for this event. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Mr. Paul Graham, who will be sharing stories of racism from Greene County's past. Denise, can you have the next slide? So Mr. Paul Graham was born in Dayton. His parents were both raised in rural Kentucky and moved to the Dayton area as part of the mass migration of Black individuals from the rural South to the industrial North. He attended Dunbar High School and joined several high school friends in writing a letter to the Dayton newspaper about the segregated practices at their school. So his activism started at an early age. He went on to earn a degree in chemistry from Antioch, where he was only one of a handful of Black students. Coretta Scott, eventually Coretta Scott King, graduated from Antioch the year before him. He eventually took a job as a chemist at Vernay Laboratories in Yellow Springs, advancing to become head of research. Mr. Graham married Precious Jewel Freeman and educated a notable woman in her own right. And while raising their family in Yellow Springs, Mr. Graham decided to get involved in organizing in his local community, including working with the Yellow Springs Committee for Fair Practices. He noted, quote, "It consisted mostly of Blacks, but there were many supportive whites who were part of the organization. It was through that organization that I got personally involved with the civil rights movement," end quote. They worked to integrate facilities open to the public in the village of Yellow Springs. By 1961, most places were integrated, with one notable exception, the barbershop. Mr. Graham agreed to be a test case for the Committee for Fair Practices. They sought a Black man to ask for a haircut from white barber Louis Gagner, who refused to serve Blacks and was the lone holdout. Quote, "He contended that he didn't know how to cut the hair of Blacks. It was a sham," end quote. So in December of 1961, Mr. Graham walked into the shop and politely asked for a haircut, accompanied by a witness. He was denied then and several more times after that. The group then filed a complaint with the newly created Ohio Civil Rights Commission. The case took several years, going through several appeals before ending up at the Ohio Supreme Court. During this time, protests were held outside the barbershop. It gained national attention, and Mr. Graham, I think a few years after this, actually appeared on the Phil Donahue show, which was filmed in Dayton at the time. Some of you may remember that. I know it was often on in the background. That I felt like my mom always had that on, right? Well, so this case culminated in a larger protest in 1964, where Antioch students barricaded the street outside the shop, and many were arrested. The barber closed his shop soon after, moved away, and the Civil Rights Commission dropped the case. Denise? Oh, I'll read this quote from local resident Bomani. He says, "To see that many people occupying downtown and the tension that was in the air, to sense that and to hear the singing and the shouts of the protesters, it was really intense." Mr. Graham continued to serve in leadership roles in Yellow Springs, serving as president of the school board and on the boards of the Dayton Area Red Cross, the Yellow Springs Chamber of Commerce, Antioch College alumni, Glen Helen. The list went on and on, so I'm not going to list them all, but let's just say he continued to be very active. He and Jewel retired in 1994, after which they began spending 3 or 4 months a year in the Bay Area. Although Mrs. Graham is no longer with us, we are so grateful that Mr. Graham still considers Yellow Springs home and is here with us today. It's been said that if we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. So it is with deep gratitude that I hope you will help me welcome Mr. Paul Graham. I've given kind of an overview, the arc of Mr. Graham's story, but now I'm going to ask him a few questions, and we're going to try to have a conversation that you all can sit in on. So Mr. Graham, can you tell us more about what first inspired you to start working for civil rights in Yellow Springs?
It was a time right after the Second World War. During a period which, particularly the Second World War, blacks served the military, as many people did at that time, to partly fighting injustice, evil, really, in the Second World War, particularly in the person of Hitler. And many the blacks who served in the Second World War returned to find that the democracy for which they were fighting in Europe did not exist in their home, America. And that was the period that really the civil rights movement started. And in the case of Yellow Springs, which had always been considered sort of a liberal community, it was really easy to get people involved in civil rights, and I was one of them. Although I did not serve in the military, I was too young in the period. When I look back to years ago, and in the case, in terms of what, well, I'll let you ask.
Okay, keep going maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Yellow Springs in particular. So you were successful in getting most local businesses to integrate. What do you think was the key to making that happen?
Well, first of all, I certainly want to point out that I was just one of many
Absolutely.
involved in Yellow Springs. And what made that particularly possible in Yellow Springs was sort of the nature of the community, which was a liberal community. Again, the nature of the times of the second, right after the Second World War. And in the case of Yellow Springs, a very small town, but with a very high population of blacks at the time. As a matter of fact, during that period, the black population of Yellow Springs approached about 25%, which was really quite inflated for the area. And one of the several reasons for the high percentage, one was that generally, although Yellow Springs was a small town, but there were several industries involved in Yellow Springs. And as a result, particularly of the industries, Antioch College, other surrounding colleges and universities, there was a very high percentage of professional blacks in Yellow Springs. And again, this was an unusually high percentage, primarily because the rest of the county was not as open and liberal as Yellow Springs, or as inviting. So that was, many people now question, wonder why the number of blacks, percentage-wise, in Yellow Springs dropped considerably from that period. And it was really sort of inflated, artificially inflated at that time, again, because of the fact that Yellow Springs was an open community, welcomed, made it possible for a number of black professionals with the location of Wright Air Force Base, the colleges in the area. As a matter of fact, in that part of the county, there were several, there still are, colleges and universities. So with a high percentage, number of blacks and professionals who really were, well, at the time, to some degree, and the interest, made the effort to improve or change the conditions in the village. Yellow Springs, even though it was quite a liberal community, was really, typical of not only Ohio, but well, the country at the time, in that it was not an open society. And in terms of how, why Yellow Springs, it was again partly because it was a rural community. It was located in an area which was part of the Underground Railroad. There was a community established not far from the village itself by a former slave owner, a man by the name of Conway, who actually helped to locate a number of blacks, former slaves, in the county. This was a person by the name of Conway. Some of you may have heard or know something of that history.
Okay, thank you. Well, I know it's easy for us here in 2022 to forget how daunting and even frightening things could be for those who are working for civil rights in the 1950s and 60s. I was wondering if you could tell us, maybe just, I gave an overview of some of the events that kind of put Yellow Springs on the map, right? I don't know if there are more details you wanted to share about what that experience was like, and if there were things that concerned you at the time of being an active participant.
One thing I can do, this all happened several years ago. As a matter of fact, about 60 years ago. And during that period, and subsequent to that, I know that many inquiries regarding what was happening, what had happened, my involvement, etc. And I have a little bit that
Sure, something you have some prepared.
that I prepared years ago, but it's still current, and it sort of summarizes what occurred in my involvement. And so I'd like to share that with you a little, perhaps answer some of the questions.
Go right ahead, yes, please.
It's somewhat ironic that one of the more active northern sites during the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s was a small, relatively progressive community in Yellow Springs. Although Yellow Springs was a microcosm of segregated U.S., there were several blacks in influential governmental positions. As a matter of fact, one might have thought that Yellow Springs was a black community, and that the mayor, the chief of police, the fire chief, the superintendent of schools, they were all black. This existed over a long period of time. And again, this was sort of artificial in a way because of the, as I cited earlier, the number of blacks, professional blacks, in the village. It was in this context after World War II, there was increased effort to improve civil rights. The village of Yellow Springs had adopted an anti-discrimination ordinance. Thus, prior to 1960, most discrimination in the village had been eliminated, with barbershops being the last holdout. One of the early legal cases against the Reluctant barber, Louis Gager, was there were several people who were actively involved in trying to persuade Gager to change his practices. One of the early cases of effort of integrating the shop resulted in a black person after being refused service, receiving well, not the person, but Gagner receiving was found guilty by a jury in a case that was filed as a result of this discrimination. But after being found guilty in the county court, he was fined a total of $1.
$1? Did I hear that right? Okay.
$1.
Okay.
Yeah. It was at this time that I joined an organization which was known as the Miami Township Committee for Fair Practices in Yellow Springs, and it was the leading civil rights organization in the community. In '61, the state of Ohio adopted legislation prohibiting discrimination in places of public accommodation. And the enforcement of this new legislation was conducted by the Ohio Civil Rights Commission. And several people had made an effort at integrating Gagner's barbershop, and all of them failed. However, with the new legislation, the Ohio Civil Rights Commission, they decided to file a test case against Louis Gagner, and that was the sort of auspices of my effort. And it was interesting that in addition to several things which were favorable for action at that time, was the fact that the director of the Ohio
The Civil Rights Commission?
Ohio Civil Rights Commission, correct? Was a Frank Baldo, who was an Antioch graduate.
Nice.
So the morning of November 9th, 1961, three or four people made an attempt to obtain service in the barbershop, and I was one of them. Later, this particular day in 1961, of the several people who made an effort at obtaining a haircut at Gagner's barbershop, it was decided that my particular effort would be a test case under the new public accommodations law. And so the Ohio Civil Rights Commission was directly involved. The commission conducted a judicial, sort of quasi judicial hearing in 1962, and as a result of their findings, issued a recommendation that Gagner cease, his discriminatory practice. And an order was issued in 1962, which was appealable by Gagner, of course. His appeal was in the county court in Xenia, and the judge at the time upheld the Gagner's appeal. His explanation, Gagner that is, of refusal was that he did not know how, to cut the hair of blacks. However, that was quite obviously a sham. And as a matter of fact, there was a Jewish person who was involved who had very curly hair, and intentionally he went into the barber shop to obtain a haircut, and did obtain a haircut, which made it quite obvious that his explanation of lack of knowledge was not accurate, not true.
Mr. Graham, would you be willing to talk about, I mean, the events that get a lot of attention was when there was, a larger group, there was a barricading. I mean, is there more you wanted to add about that day when people were arrested? I don't know if you had thoughts on that particular day.
Yes, right. Of course, Gabriel did everything he could to oppose, objecting to the picketing, and as a result of his objection, the court restricted the number of people picketing, and in response to that, we accelerated the picketing, as I mentioned, from just weekends to daily, and as a result of that acceleration, the local judge in counties and Xenia did issue an order restricting the number of picketers, and with that order restricting the number, as I indicated, in fact it was increased, and the increase was a result of more people in Yellow Springs picketing, but also people in the surrounding area, particularly college students at Wilberforce, UP, etc. And let's see, I already mentioned that was with an order restricting the number of picketers and the reaction of actually even more acceleration, the students, particularly, who were much more anxious or and active, physical, in an effort to integrate the shop, decided that they would not only picket, but have a demonstration blocking the passage of traffic on Route 68, the main street in Yellow Springs, and this blockage of the traffic, of course, was immediately opposed by not only Gagner, but actually officials in the area, including law enforcement officials. It happened that, I forgot to mention it earlier, that the chief of police in Yellow Springs at the time was a black person. Some of you may have known him, James McKee. And the other law enforcement officials in the area didn't think that McKee was doing an adequate job in controlling the situation in Yellow Springs. So actually, several law enforcement officials, the sheriffs, the chiefs of police, etc., sort of, took over the law enforcement of the picketing, because they these other officials didn't feel that McKee was doing enough to control the situation.
Well, just in the interest of time, I have a final question for you. You know, most of us are residents here of Greene County, and we owe you a debt of gratitude for the work you did in the 1960s. What do you want to say to us today? You know, what do you think those of us here today should be doing to continue the fight against racism?
Well, first of all, the voting is very important. I think that's probably one of the main things that everyone can and should do. And the actually through not only the school system, but in other areas too, doing more research, investigation, publication, etc., of the true history of racism in the country, which, well, actually, the education in the area was a disservice in that generally the history of slavery really, rather than being adequately truly reported or acknowledged, it was actually things were done to sort of to hide what had and was occurring. Yeah. Well, I sort of didn't address part of your question as to what people should be doing.
Well, we answered it. That's coming under attack, right? With schools being charged with teaching critical race theory, and it's I mean, so I think it's just as relevant today, right?
Yes, the education is very important. By education, I mean making efforts to truly report, investigate, acknowledge. The acknowledgement is extremely important because to a great extent it was the whole history not only was not adequately reported, but was ignored and hidden. And so what people can and should do is everything they can to sort of publicize, acknowledge, and recognize what has occurred historically. The recognition is very important because to a great extent what has occurred is a result of America sort of ignoring and keeping quiet, hidden to some degree, to hiding what really had occurred historically. So changing that situation, and certainly one of the main ways of doing that is becoming active politically. Again, voting being one of what I consider one of the main sources.
Well, I think that's, we'll transition to kind of our next phase, talking about the present, but I think that's what we're doing is trying to shine a light on these stories of our more distant past, recent past, and where we can go from here. So, I appreciate you being here so much to, be living history is kind of what it feels like, and so that happened in our backyard. So I hope that you all join me in recognizing
right, welcome back, everyone. I hope you have enjoyed the coffee and the wonderful treats over there. Home Cooked Vibes is the company or the business that created the parfaits and the muffins. They're part of the wonderful incubator program that the City of Fairborn runs. Encouraging new businesses. They've created a whole stream of economic activity, homegrown. So that's a wonderful program if you ever get a chance to check that out. But thank you to them for the food. And Dunkin' Donuts, yes. Their name's all over that. There's no mistaking whose coffee that is. Thank you, Dunkin' Donuts. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the film. I apologize for the quality if you want to watch it again with better sound and, coordinated lip movement. It's on the Kerwin Institute website online. You can find that easily. And I encourage you to share it with your friends, of course. Just 1 hour long. Easy watch. All right, so now we're here to welcome Mr. Ronnie Morland. We probably feel like we know him. We just saw him in action in the film. A slightly younger version, I assume, like we all were back then. But I welcome Clint Allen, City of Fairborn Council member. He is going to spend some time up here with Ronnie and introduce him. Thank you.
A lot of what we do for Greene County Voices is under the leadership of Kim McCarthy, who is a I said she was more of a pit bull, but someone says she's an aggressive pit bull. She's right after you.
An aggressive kangaroo, I thought.
Aggressive kangaroo. Okay, yeah, I'll take that. But she is absolutely a strong advocate for people's rights, for folks to do the right thing. And I love her spirit. I get an opportunity now to serve with her really, really quick. I'll get an opportunity to serve with her since she is now the chairperson for the Greene County Democratic Party, and I'll be her vice chair. So we look forward to great things there. So without further ado, Mr. Ronnie Moreland, Deacon Ronnie Moreland, you all have already witnessed some of his fire. I think I say fire because I'm from South Carolina, so it isn't going to be fire, it's going to be fire. But we witnessed some of that as he shared lead. He is also a veteran of the Air Force. He spent 8 years in the Air Force, so I consider him a brother. I spent 28 years in the Air Force, so cool to that. And again, as I mentioned, he's a deacon at Macedonia Baptist Church in Dayton. He's a past president of Leaders for Equity and Action in Dayton. That's Dayton Lead. He's a graduate of Wright State. And I think Mr. Graham is gone already, is he? But Mr. Graham is a proud Dunbar graduate, and we're fortunate to have another proud Dunbar graduate. I can't get away from the Dunbarites, go Wolverines, is that what it is? You always see them because they wear these tight sweatsuits that are back in the 70s and they're still wearing them. But I joke about that, but I love them. That school is truly named after Paul Laurence Dunbar, and I think this year they're commemorating his 150th year. Great history there. So without further ado, I'm going to have Deacon Ronnie Moreland say a few words and share his thoughts, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience.
Well, I first want to thank you, Clint and Kim, and all of you for the opportunity to share. 11 years have passed. Lot to reflect on. Mr. Graham has stolen my heart and my mind because he reminds me so much of my father. The lessons I was taught as a child. About getting involved and not shrinking to what the truth is, you know. So sorry for that. It's just good to know that I'm looking at people that care enough and that are bold enough. Just to shed light on the second thing I want to share is I'm thankful to Ohio State University and the Curry Institute. Just want to share what happened with this film because we didn't know what they were about when they came to Dayton, other than the fact that they were stalking us. And they sought out Wilma Ryder. She has passed away. Unfortunately, I consider her a mother figure to me. She taught me more about fighting civil rights. She is a Cal Berkeley graduate. I sat in her living room with her husband, Dick Ryder, for so many months, giving books, teaching me how to keep my temperament even when we're dealing with people that wield unjust power. She taught me so much. And I was the president of the league in an unpopular time when we had no money. This issue was not our priority. We had not voted on it. The Hispanic community was growing in Dayton, and that pregnant woman that Willie talked about was her inspiration for putting us together to figure out what we could do locally. We did not start protesting and had this great fight that ended up the way it was before we were humble enough to go to Beaver Creek. We asked them, we met with their leaders, and we tried to do this without a lot of public fanfare. We knew we didn't have the money, we knew we didn't have the representation, but what they did not know is that we had a Wilma Ryder that was a champion. She marched with Dr. Queen, and she knows probably Mr. Graham, the brain is flooding with so much to say about that, but what I will say is the city of Beaver Creek, at the time, in my opinion, was dealt a bad blow of leadership. You don't demonize people. People don't go as far as you allow them to go, understanding what the law is, wanting to have closed communities, using public funds, and all that. But let me share a little bit about this film for Ohio State. It made its world premiere in the DC Independent Film Festival out of more than 2,000 submissions from around the world, 80 selections, including 6 feature documentaries. Our documentary, Free to Ride, won Best Documentary honors for 2017. So that tells us. And on the top of that, Free to Ride became popularity throughout the country and around the world. That same group, Mr. Whitlock, Mr. Finkel, Mr. Donahue, and myself, Willie had been sick, but we were invited to go to Manhattan, go to New York to show the same film. They had issues in their subway system. I was so intimidated to go to, I've never been in New York City in my life. But to hear how appreciative that they were, that a small group of people, no bigger than those of us in this room right now, did so much to change. As you saw, it was the first time in history of the United States that the Department of Highways had to move in another direction to file a Title VI complaint against a jurisdiction that it was built to support. You saw the emotion of the leader of the Department of Highways. It was under President Obama's watch at the time. But I'm just so grateful. I'll just leave it there.
All right, is there any questions from the board? Anyone?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think, I mean, Beaver Creek's not unique, right? I mean, we have a lot of more affluent neighborhoods across our community in southwest Ohio, and even in Ohio. Do you think there's been much change? I mean, or do you think that regardless of where you would have been, that you would have had the same kind of pushback
I think you made your point that it's not an anomaly, right? Sometimes you have to show people the error of their ways humbly, right? It's how you package. If you and I were talking, I say, if you were Manhattan, that's in Manhattan, I want to have a conversation with you about your transportation issues. Can we sit down? And then get promised so much. Yes, we'll do this. Yes, we'll do that. The answer to the question, some things got better. Some things. I would say, now because I'm so-called educated, I have a master's in public administration now. I'm the first male in my family to ever go to college and finish. So I thank you for that, but because I had to learn politics is an ugly, it's a beautiful career for those that are into that, but it can sway based on how you get influenced by money and by power. I don't need to tell you what state we're in right now as the United States. And it's almost alarming what's happening. So yes, some things have changed for the better, but it also, for those that don't have goodwill, it reinforces their belief that a country that doesn't belong to them individually, they're fighting to protect territory that they don't own. Right? This American experiment is an experiment, and our nation is not as old as some other civilizations. If we're not careful, this free democracy that we live in won't look like, as bad as it is now, it'll look worse in another 20 years from now. When you have leadership that will sway a nation to attack a capital, it's a symbol of our democracy, because you are so Luther. I'm not calling any names, I don't people. Because you don't like losing, you're willing to sacrifice the lives of other people just so you can remain in position. Well, and then those powers don't care about you as an individual. They just care about the power. So yes, some things, to answer the question, yes, some things got better, but some things got inherently worse because it put a lot more people under this.
For people like groups like ours, Sugarcreek Cares, Fairborn's, Inclusive Fairborn, Beaver Creek, how, because I get very frustrated. Trying to do things like this, to have people come in and just hear stories and try to educate. Mr. Graham this morning said two important things. He said the vote, and then the second thing he talked about was the education piece. And that part frustrates me as much as the vote part does.
Yes, ma'am.
How do we get people to learn more? Because people are generally ignorant.
Yeah, and that's all of us, right? And so, thank you for that, because Mr. Graham made a great point, voting, but what I remember my parents and those that mentored me and really taught me is not just vote. Get educated in your voting. Know the history of those people that we put into office. Understand their voting history and track record. The issues they stand for, because I'm going to tell you, there's some people that were in another party that will go to independent, but just to push their agenda and get the liberal votes or whatever vote they might have, just so you understand what people are standing for, what they vote, it will better inform you as who we should push forward to represent us. Because once they get sworn into office, it takes a lot more time and there's a lot more damage that can happen when they side with the wrong group. Because they get romanticized about the positions in which they sit. So get voter education. Education is good, but education means nothing if we're not exercising the content and how that impacts us as citizens of a nation that's supposed to be free and open to the world.
Hello, my name is Summer McGuire. Okay.
There's my face. But I'm very mask. In 95, back on, it's a pandemic, y'all, so but ain't over yet. So I wear a few different hats. Before I talk about my hats and myself, sir, first I want to thank you for what you've done for our community, for what you've done for the trying to create spaces where freedom is able to breathe a little, and to share some familiarity with bonds of oppression and with the fight and struggle and at times the exhausting nature of that struggle, but we still keep moving because that's how you're raised, that's how you're taught. And I thank you for that vulnerability and for talking about your father and his teachings, because my mom's at home fighting a stomach bug, otherwise she'd be right here with me, and that's how she raised me, and that's how I'm trying to raise this little one here. This is Maddie McGuire, who's very shy and is doing her thing. But all that said, I'm the vice president of the Dayton LULAC Council. LULAC is the League of United Latin American Citizens. We also are kind of like a sibling organization to NAACP in terms of we share similar journeys in advocating for our community and for our people. We're a 93-year-old civil rights organization focused on a broad range of issues. We have councils across the country. Well, I serve with our local council. I'm also on our state board. My mom is our president of our Dayton Council, but also our state director for Ohio. We've been working solidly throughout the pandemic to advocate for our people and to also ally ourselves with our Black community. So we're creating a Black and Brown agenda and looking at ways that we can lift each other up through work and support one another, and then also reach out to our allies. To strengthen allies is important and critical. And so when I look across this room, and I was apologize for my tardiness, it was a crazy working mama morning, but I'm so encouraged and heartened, and I want to see more people and more faces, and I want to do another screening of this. So I already talked to Mr. Allen, and we're going to talk. And I know this one. I know exactly how to find her. So I'm motivated and I'm fired up because when I saw Ms. Ryder, I talked to Mr. Allen and I said I wanted to meet her. So I'm trying not to get emotional now, but I want to go pay my respects. So if you know where to go, let me know, because it's vital, absolutely vital, that we find a way to communicate to people that helps to affect transformation. And to hear those stories that you were just talking about, they're vital, they're critical, because that's how we can reach hearts. The folks sitting in that room in the Beaver Creek Council, sitting around the table, were clutching their fear and not opening their ears, right? And they didn't understand how they're just looking for ways to exist, right? Folks just want ways to get to jobs and to provide for their families and to do everything that those folks sitting around that table that are eating at their tables and sitting under their roofs are doing. So just to see y'all fighting for that and winning the day. I was born in Fairborn, first of all, and I experienced some things there. That's a whole story for another day. I live in Yellow Springs, been there since the 80s, more or less, with my family, and I'm grateful to be there. I'm grateful for the social justice work in that community and the rootedness and all of that. And I try to do my part to contribute, and I try to do my part to represent my indigenous ancestors and my Latino ones. So all that to say, I feel like when I saw the decision, it hurt because it was just their wallets that got their attention. So I was grateful for the teachings of Paulo Freire, who talks about in his book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, the importance of liberating the oppressed, but also liberating the oppressor from that system. Because when you transform those hearts, they're not going to be looking for ways to put you in bondage again, because they see you, they are you, and then you got one less group of folks over here at your, trying to put their foot on your neck. So I feel like there's still a whole hell of a lot of work to be done, to be really frank, and I'm not afraid to do it, and I'm joining y'all, and I'm excited to join the rest of y'all too. Thank you. Thank you.
The fight for what this film represented, as I stated, was not something we took on initially. the Latin American and Hispanic community came to us as a lead organization because what they wanted was legitimacy. They wanted to be able to get driver's license, all of those things that we enjoy without thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
But the only issue with us is it was a state issue, and we were dealing with social local justice issues. We kept them at the table. We started fighting the RTA. Let me start over. Mark Donaghy was not an ally of LEAD when we began. The Latin American Hispanic community came to us with an issue. That pregnant woman that would invite her, she has 2 daughters left, and so I have to find out where they are. They're my sisters, but we'll figure it out. What happened that came out of that is, if you go to the RTA website, they have 2 things that's making a ton of money for them. It is the family pass and the single day pass. You could, if you spend $3 any direction, you can go all day for $3 anywhere RTA goes. That was the best. We did that for the Hispanic community, the Latin American community, and we needed bilingual language. And all of their hubs and all of that exists now. And those day passes and the way they have innovated their ridership availability and how they have access has increased their bottom line number. Mr. Donaghy has retired since, they have new leaders, but the RTA understood. They didn't think it was going to make any money, and they will to this day tell you that that was one of the greatest additions to the RTA brand since this thing started. So, just let you know. Yeah, we took an unpopular stand, but the fight we didn't know whether we could win for that community. Now, they didn't get them the driver's license, but it made it so much sweeter for a pregnant mom to get safe access to wherever she or he wanted to go.
And now the city of Dayton is helping to get state IDs too, or get city IDs, like municipal IDs, so that the community can at least have that. So that's a whole.
That's the answer to the question. So some progress has been made.
Exactly.
So that's pretty interesting that, that the fight, that you took on the fight that you didn't want to take on, and for a cause that you didn't want to take on, and you fought the bus system that fought you back, you know, and city council. I mean, it's interesting how all that dynamic works in the struggle. So there's a gift in the struggle.
There is.
So,
And it wasn't the fact that we didn't think it was winnable. We didn't think it was winnable. So we needed some quick hitters to build momentum with the faith community and the groups that would focus on us. So you couldn't take something like crime. Well, you mean crime. You know, which part of crime? You know, you couldn't take broad brushstrokes. But when you talk about bus transportation or just access from point A to point B, that became something palatable for us.
Sorry. I'm Lindsay Locke. I'm one of the leaders in Citizens for a Better Sugarcreek for about 3 years old? Yeah, about 3 years old. We have, and it's been on our minds and hearts for a while, we still have a lot of those same issues where we have racism in our city, we have classism in our city, we have ableism in our city, and there's still things that we need to do. We have that one access point in Beaver Creek, right? So how do we get to the rest of the city? How do we get to, you know, like one of the issues that we're running into is that the school system itself is running low on buses. So if they went with RTA and had like high schoolers ride to the high school, for example, that would alleviate that issue. But how do we take those next steps for inclusivity to help people who have disabilities or, you know, are maybe older and they can't drive or they have lower incomes? How do we facilitate to make the community be more open rather than closed?
That's more easy for me to answer. Let me share something about Beaver Creek that is unique and that is good. Green Cat system, you might have seen some examples of that in the documentary. Green Cat is a decent system, but it is an appointment schedule ride type system and it doesn't have fixed routes. Right? RTA represented the first fixed route. Bus number 1, Pentagon Boulevard, is the one that serves Wright State University. It goes and takes that entire loop to the mall and back. You can pick up and park your car anywhere in the mall, get on the bus. Go into downtown, just like Green Cats. The answer to the question is we didn't want to demonize Green Cats in our whole fight. We did not. We understood that RTA is incremental, the expansion. But I will assure you, and I want to give you hope that eventually Green Cats will have some challenges with the fixed route. People are on schedules, right? You hear what I'm saying? And so before Mark Donahue and Frank Eckler and all those folks retired, and after we were coming back to New York, I kind of posed that question: How do we now make it make it easier for to have more inclusivity in transportation access? It is to show, and you can base it on the numbers of Beaver Creek, that bus has not increased crime, not one iota. As a matter of fact, you got more residents from Wright State University students and the citizens of Beaver Creek that take a fixed route right into downtown hub, transfer to wherever they want to go. Green Cats brings their buses in, and we have never complained in Dayton about Green Cats, and RTA welcomed them to their hub. It is that relationship and how they can work together. So Green Cats, RTA officials, and the community will have to come together, come to grips with the idea that what you're saying is true. You need as many voices as you can to sit at the table like we did in very early stages, and then you mark out, you have to be specific. Which areas are being impacted adversely for not having it, the fixed route? What can Green Cats do to alleviate it, if nothing else, and to show people in a certain time to get to the Route 1 in the interim? But RTA will be expanding. Maybe not in this decade, but they will be expanding. But they understood, I won't say we, because I'm not there with RTA, they don't need to say anything for them. All that money they made from that bus accident. But it is the slowest, but it's the most effective, is to stay consistent, stay patient. This is a different type of patience. Some urgent patience. So don't let people off the hook when they know they have no clear explanation that makes it sense. Be as diverse, bring as many diverse people to the table as you can possibly bring. Right? If you saw the film, it was not just people of color, just brown and black folks at that table. There was not that going across that bridge. People joined the fight more as it got more public visibility. The media didn't jump on it until like apparent. Local artist Mike Peters, he's a nationally syndicated cartoonist. He shamed Beaver Creek for their decision, and he is a resident. I think he is a graduate of Beaver Creek High School. But even he came and met with us and said, I don't like it. I'll do what I do, what we can do, and everybody will contribute what they can. So just to be able to shed light, new light, right? We're not fighting old battles, right? And so we have a whole nother group of young people that are taking the mantle of adulthood that don't see it that way. But you, me, and all of us don't educate them on the past and how. And I applaud you for having the courage to do that. Stay with it. Stay with it when you don't have any money. Stay with it when you have support, when people call you names, when they honk their horns and tell you that you're not one of us, that you're one of those people. I mean, I fought for life after I laid my life on the line. But to come back home from putting my life on the line to fighting folks that swore in, like I swore in to defend the Constitution, you have to hold them accountable.
Hi, my name is Cynthia Dunlop, and I'm from Clark County. And thank you. Just thank you. And I definitely believe and embrace what you say about we need to educate ourselves about who is running and their history and what they bring to the table, because that's really important. And I really love what you said about holding their feet to the accountability fires, because it just seems like that isn't happening at this point in time. Now, with Kim's permission, I brought in and sat some information regarding 3 of the people who are running for the Supreme Court, the Ohio Supreme Court. We can make history in Ohio. One is Latina, and she rode the subways 4 hours one way and another to get her education. The other, whom I am helping with all of my heart and being, is Judge Jameson. And she is a woman of color, and she worked in the coal mines in West Virginia and worked her way up and went to community college, worked to get her bachelor's, was a small business owner, so she knows what it's like to pull your hair out in a small business. Sold that business, went to law school, and has done what she can to help educate us. So please pick up that information. And my question to you is, given that there is one party rule in the state of Ohio, there is not diversity at the table, and it is not welcomed. Do you think that the tactics that you used of trying to educate people and get them to have a better understanding of the impact of their actions and their decisions would work today? Or have we come to the point, as was said in this film, that you just have to have dogged determination, and yes, we are going to be at the table, and yes, we are going to have some say, and yes, we are going to live our values and do what we say by representing all the people?
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you for the question. I think, yes, on both fronts. I think that what we have done is effective. How do I know that history has shown us that organizing yourself, being as diverse as possible, that even with the one-party system, America, we have to weed out the things that we know are going to tear us apart. We do. Sometimes it's slower than we need it to be. And without going too far into what I believe, I'm a person of faith. And I'm not ashamed to say that I love God. I'm never going to be ashamed of that. Somehow, in His infinite wisdom, I believe He knows what's in control. He's in control. But certain things have to occur to shake us out of our ugliness. I'm not saying that no one should be hurt. I'm not saying that this is destined. I'm saying that in Bible school you learn that you're supposed to show your light. Well, we hide our light through intimidation, through being in group versus out group, by trying to be uncomfortable. If it makes you uncomfortable to talk about racism, then you're in the right conversation.
Yes.
It's when you're comfortable in your own conviction that it's dangerous. If you're comfortable that you've done enough and you're doing enough, then you just did it for your time. When you're comfortable saying, look what I've done in the past, you're a dangerous human being. Because you're saying that the things that I value only matter in my time of existence. Mr. Grant said he did not know how long he would be. 1964? And we're still having this conversation in 2022. He would tell you right now it's worthless. He would have given his life in that barbershop. Not for a haircut. It's what he believed in. And it's that type of courage that makes me a little emotional. because he's watching me and my family. What do we do? What are we doing? Because he didn't come here for us to applaud him and thank him for all that and put a statue of him out there. He wants lasting change. And that's what America craves, is that we always talk about the good old days. The good old days had its ugly side to it. Right? Because if it wasn't in your backyard, you didn't have to worry about it. Ohio was a free state. Who would know that? Based on facts. We like to romanticize what we've done as a nation. But what we're afraid of is facing the ugly truth of how we got here. And how many people we had to step on and step over to get it. How many bank accounts have billions of dollars for their children and grandchildren that were born out of racism, slavery, murder, and the like.
Stolen land.
Stolen land. And I'll stop with this. The women of our nation are the strongest, right now, piece of the fix to our problem. Because when we did women the way we did, not quite slavery was not, I'm not going to look at the Holocaust of slavery to that. But women were just supposed to be women, housewives, and what have you. But there's nothing like the insight of an American woman or an immigrant woman that comes to be free in America that understands having to wait for your voice. Are you understanding where I'm going? That will teach a child, that will be patient with a child. If I would have became, for lack of a better term, an axe murderer, my mom would still love me, but she still would scorn me for not paying attention. We as men have to support any and every group, because we still will, men think they still will the power of the dollar in this country. But we use it to close gaps, to close access to different types of things, right? So if just like in the family, if you didn't have, if my kid needed a job or go to school on the other side of 675 before a bus route came, this is an example. My father would have walked me as far as he could walk me until he found another father that could walk me a little further. Right? So it's going to take, again, it's going to take us some perseverance. If you're not willing to go through something for it, it won't be worth it. You can't lose more. If you go home and shut your doors at night and are okay with the way this community is run, it might be great today, but you have something to protect for the future. You have some more lessons to teach people. We're not going to be on planet Earth much longer, y'all. Let's just face it. I'm 63. In another 40 years, I probably won't be here. But the input, the people that I invest, if you want to, Clint can duplicate Clint by teaching what Clint knows about the facts, about the history, to anyone and everyone who listens. And our young people, instead of being taught to us talking to them, you better start listening to them. Because as nuts as they are when school is out for the summer, my wife and I, we have many grandchildren we have. We have over 12. We're the Brady's. We're the they're sharp, and they want it all.
Yeah.
And if I do something contrary to what I believe in front of one of my grandchildren, they're going to say, Papa, that's not right. That's not right. And then I'll say something smart like, well, you're not supposed to correct me. And they don't listen to me anymore. They just say, oh, you're interested. But what they want, people want to be taught. They really do. They want the truth. What they do with it is what we're here for. You know the truth, what are you going to do? If it's my friend, that's a neighbor, that's a little standoff, if that man's my best friend, when I go somewhere, I'm going to call him and say, Matthew, I got to go. You going with me? Man, I'll call you back. No, Matthew, where you at? I'm coming to get you right now. I'll buy you lunch, let's go. You don't allow Matthew. I know what kind of voice he has. I know the influence Matthew has. I need Matthew with me. So people know that's my friend. And he's willing to stand with me. If Matthew won't stand with me, I need to find a new friend. I can still love Matthew from a distance. But for the fight of maintaining democracy, if he's not on the bus, I gotta wait for him to get on. The next move is to find a new rider. Who ride with me?
Thank you, Ronnie. We could listen to you all day, but thank you so much for that's very inspirational, and it's a lot for us to absorb, frankly. I'm going to have to watch that video again when it's up online, but thank you so much. Appreciate it. Well, there's only one place left for us to be, and that's the future, which is literally now. So it's unwritten, as they say, right? Which is why we're now here to show you where your future can be. We're going to hear from our local groups. They'll give you a short update on what they've been doing over the last year and what they're doing in the future so that you can join in and get on that bus with them ASAP. So I'm going to start by welcoming up Lindsay from Citizens for a Better Beaver Creek.
First of all, I want to say thank you for all of you coming out here. I appreciate it. It's been very educational and humbling, we'll say the least. I'm Lindsay Locke from Citizens for a Better Beaver Creek. Our organization is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the greater Beaver Creek area, and we've been trying to partner up with Fairborn, Sugarcreek Cares, Yellow Springs, etc., just so that we're kind of all on the same page. Recently, we started up the Equity Inclusion Committee for the Greater Miami Valley, which is for anybody in and around Dayton. So I'm excited about that. We've been doing get-togethers for different initiatives. Tomorrow, we're actually throwing our first pride, which is very exciting, kind of anxiety-provoking, I won't lie. I kind of just hope all the stars align and it'll be fun. Our biggest success has been with the schools. We're trying to slowly kind of help them move along in their diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, and it's been very encouraging. We've been making contacts within the schools themselves and organizations such as GSA and some other smaller groups. We're hoping we actually have hopefully some law enforcement activity coming up. We have another person that just recently said she'd step up, and we're excited. We have a Facebook page, which I try to post pretty much every day because I have issues. And we have our group, which we have open discussions, much more open discussions, just so that those can be safe. It is a closed group, but anybody can find it. So that's us. Thank you.
Okay, and that Pride event is from 2 till 4 at Lafino Park.
Yes.
Right? Lafino Park tomorrow, 2 o'clock. All right, thanks. Thanks, Lindsay. All right, next up we have Dexter Bailey with Inclusive Fairborn.
All right, so I'm Dexter Bailey with Inclusive Fairborn, and this year with Inclusive Fairborn, we have done many things, but Inclusive Fairborn is a organization. It's like a committee inside of Fairborn that seeks to include all people, no matter what your color is or what your thought is. So here in the beginning of the year, we had the Martin Luther King Award ceremony. Many students around the community actually put in their art and their poetry and their expressions, and we awarded them, many of them, for expressing their thoughts and their feelings about how Martin Luther King affected their lives. We're going to be enjoying, at the end, a LGBTQ Zoom meeting for supporting your LGBTQ child on the 21st, I believe. That'll be a Zoom meeting at 7 p.m. You can take a look on our Facebook page at Inclusive Fairborn to register for that. We'll also have on the 19th, working with the City of Fairborn, the Juneteenth celebration. We'll be working in the park, Community Central Park, right there in the very center of Fairborn. We're going to be having food. We're going to be having people doing poetry, song, and people coming together to show the importance of the Juneteenth celebration. Since, this is like the first ever that we have done in the city of Fairborn. As some of you may know, that Fairborn is a sundown town, or the last sundown town in Ohio, which meant that there were laws on the books that said if you were a person of color, if you were black, you had to be out of the town of Fairborn before the sun went down. And I'll tell you, just watching this movie here, I had so many mixed emotions. The emotion I felt when I learned that it was a sundown town. I had the same emotions that I felt when I watched the George Floyd video. You start to watch the video and say, oh man, what's going on here? And then your mood changes. You're like, whoa, wait, something not right. And then something turns and you say, nah, something has to be done. And Inclusive Fairborn, I want to iterate and reiterate, just like Beaver Creek cares, just like Sugarcreek cares. Listen, just like all of our inclusive diversity committees around the city, it's really a point where you want to be on the right side of history. And, Paul came and he said when World War II had ended, they knew, Hitler wasn't right. Something needs to be done. But guess what? Our people are coming home, and they coming home to the same kind of thing. It's not right. And so, because he was talking about 62, 63, it was a little letter that Martin Luther King wrote at the exact same time as he was at the barbershop. The exact same time, and this is something, because I just got this book from Wright State University. Wright State Bookstore is closing because it's all going online, and they was giving things out for like 75% off. I said, oh my gosh, Martin Luther King got a book? Dude, nobody told me about his book. And when I took it to the register, they said, oh my gosh, Martin Luther King wrote a book? I said, yeah, apparently he wrote 3 of them. Nobody told us about it. This is why we can't wait. And I want to read this real quick letter. It's a real quick letter at the very beginning of the book. And this wraps up everything that our committee stands for. And it wraps up why even everybody in here, we can't wait. So it says, it is the beginning of our Lord, 1963. I see a young black boy. He is sitting on a stoop in front of a vermin-infested apartment house in Harlem. The stench of garbage is in the halls. The drunks, the jobless, the junkies are shadow figures of his everyday world. The boy goes to a school attended mostly by black students with a scattering of Puerto Ricans. His father is one of the jobless. His mother is a sleep-in domestic, working for a family on Long Island. I see a young black girl. She is sitting on the stoop of a rickety wooden one-family house in Birmingham. Some visitors will call it a shack. It needs paint badly, and the patched-up roof appears in danger of caving in. Half a dozen small children in various stages of undressing are scampering about the house. The girl is forced to play the role of their mother. She can no longer attend the all-Negro school in her neighborhood because her mother died only recently after a car accident. Neighbors say if the ambulance hadn't come so late to take her to the all-black hospital, the mother might still be alive. The girl's father is a porter in a downtown department store. He will always be a porter, for there are no promotions for the black in this store, where every counter serves him except the one that sells hot dogs and orange juice. This boy and this girl, separated by stretching miles, are wondering, why does misery constantly haunt the Negro? In some distant past, had their forebears done some tragic injury to the nation, and was the curse of punishment upon the black race? Had they shirked in their duty as patriots, betrayed their country, denied their national birthright? Had they refused to defend their land against a foreign foe? Not all of history is recorded in the books supplied to school children in Harlem or Birmingham. Yet this boy and this girl know something of the part of history which has been censored by the white writers and purchasers of Board of Education books. They know that blacks were with George Washington at Valley Forge. They know that the first American to shed blood in the revolution which freed his country from British oppression was a black seaman named Crispus Attucks. The boy's Sunday school teacher has told him that one of the team who designed the capital of their nation, Washington, D.C., was a black man, Benjamin Banneker. Once the girl had heard a speaker invited to her school during Black History Week. This speaker told how for 200 years, without wages, black people brought to this land in slave ships and in chains had drained the swamps, built the homes, made cotton king, and helped on whiplash backs to lift this nation from colonial obscurity to commanding influence in domestic commerce and world trade. Wherever there was hard work, dirty work, dangerous work, in the mines, on the docks, in the blistering foundries, blacks had done more than their share. The pale history books in Harlem and in Birmingham told how the nation had fought a war over slavery. Abraham Lincoln had signed a document that would come to be known as the Emancipation Proclamation. The war had been won, but not a just peace. Equality had never arrived. Equality was 100 years late. The boy and the girl knew more than history. They knew something about current events. They knew that African nations had burst the bonds of colonialism. They knew that a great-great-grandson of Crispus Attucks might be ruled out of some restricted all-white restaurant in some restricted all-white section of a southern town, his United States Marine uniform notwithstanding. They knew that Negroes lived in the capital of their own nation, were confined to ghettos, and could not always get a job for which they were qualified. They knew that white supremacists had defied the Supreme Court and that Southern governors had attempted to interpose themselves between the people and the highest law of the land. They knew that for years their own lawyers had won great victories in the courts, which were not being translated into reality. They were seeing on television, hearing from the radio, reading in the newspapers that this was the 100th birthday of their freedom. But freedom had a dull ring, a mocking emptiness when, in their time, in the short lifespan of this boy and girl, buses had stopped rolling in Montgomery. Sit-inners were jailed and beaten. Freedom riders were brutalized and mobbed. Dogs' fangs were bared in Birmingham. And in Brooklyn, New York, there were certain kinds of construction jobs for whites only. It was the summer of 1963. Was emancipation a fact? Was freedom a farce? The boy in Harlem stood up. The girl in Birmingham arose. Separated by stretching miles, both of them squared their shoulders and lifted their eyes towards heaven. Across the miles, they joined hands and took a firm forward step. It was a step that rocked the richest, most powerful nation to its foundation. This is the story of that boy and that girl. This is the story of why we can't wait. And I just wanted to say that we can't wait. We cannot wait. We got to do it today. We got to stand on the right side of history because it's going to happen again and again until we learn how to stop it. So that's what we've been up to with Inclusive Fairborn.
All right, so Sugarcreek Cares is up next. Meredith Briniger, their chair, will give a short update.
I'll try to keep it brief. I know we're running long. We're all probably starting to get hungry. So we were created in 2020 following the murder of George Floyd. I just want to acknowledge, I think, Ronnie, I think somebody mentioned the pain. Sometimes it has to happen, right? I think his pain, I hope we honored him in his life this morning. So Sugarcreek Cares, we started out with rallies protesting the injustice of the murder of George Floyd. Since then, we've been a co-sponsor of this anti-racism event this year and last. We've also partnered with the Bellbrook Library to host several book club discussions on DEI books. This April, we read the graphic memoir, They Called Us Enemy by George Takei. Great, quick read, not light, but quick. And April was a busy month because we also announced our first recipient of the Diversity Ally Award, which went to librarian Amanda Brenner. We also participated in the Sugar Maple Festival, held in Bellbrook each year. We had about a dozen people walk in the parade and hosted an information tent that Saturday and Sunday of the festival. We had a steady stream of visitors, we offered free DEI tattoos that brought people in and gave some great messages to the kids. They loved them. And we also displayed information about our organization, about the Underground Railroad sites in Greene County, which Mr. Graham referred to, and the story of Colonel Charles Young. In May, we learned that we were granted 501c3 status, so this was an exciting milestone, and we hope to move forward to apply for grants to get funding, because again, what do you do when you have no money, right? It's a struggle. We're excited to have our school superintendent here, Dr. Kozad. Thank you for being here. We would love to partner with you to sponsor a video and art contest this coming year related to diversity. I know I have felt inspired by learning. We've joined with the DEI, Miami Valley DEI groups, and we've learned what others are doing, right? Kettering's had an essay contest, a Martin Luther King essay contest for 50 years. Fairborn has their inaugural one this year, I believe. So, or second year, sorry. So we would love to follow in those footsteps. Pardon? Oh, surprise, right? But yes, but we're overdue, right? We would love to do something that, to make it modernize it, to have a video essay contest or things that are relevant to our youth right now. What else do I want to say? We have been established with a board of officers. Moving forward, we hope to hold quarterly meetings. We have a website, a Facebook page, and a group, which we encourage you to check out if you haven't already. You're welcome to join and participate. Even if you don't live in Bellbrook and Sugarcreek, we would love to have you. So did I miss anything, Denise?
I do want to express that while we have all these good things going on, we do have challenges going on. We've run into brick walls dealing with our school board. It has been a concrete wall that is 10 feet thick. Can't even get an answer out of them. So one of the things that Mr. Graham talked about today was education. And Dexter, what you point to was the non-truth history, the non-accurate history, I guess I should say, or non-truth, is a problem in our school system. And that's one of the things we're trying to hit hard with. So anybody has any suggestions for that, please let us know.
Honesty for Education Ohio is a good ally. Reach out to them. They're already doing work. And in each of these organizations, I challenge you each to be voices against the bills that are being circulated right now around fighting education and honest dialogue and discourse. And like Deacon Moreland was saying, learning about our past, educating our children about our past so they can know how to take us into the future. So yeah, that's an important piece of the dialogue right now for sure.
And it's more of the left out history.
Yeah.
It's not that, nobody's trying to lie.
Right.
all the time, but it's a part of history that's left out.
Yeah,
And if they don't know,
exactly.
Yeah, we can
It's
post
they-
resources
they
in the
operate out
event
of
page for
ignorance.
this,
Yeah.
like about where to reach out to those places, right?
Jennifer?
Is that okay?
Yep.
One of
Yeah.
the most disappointing things, having grown up in Montgomery County, moving to Greene County and being here for 20 years, just recently moving back to Montgomery County was, when we moved here, we couldn't decide, should we go to Bellbrook schools or should we go to Centerville? Will our daughter fit in because she's nerdier in a small school system like Bellbrook, or will she have more opportunities in Centerville? Sadly, I now regret that we didn't go the Centerville route, because now she's 30 years old, married her high school sweetheart, who's biracial, and to still sit and have dinner and to hear the things that he went through as a biracial child in this small town community. We need to be having a real honest conversation about this stuff, and that's why I'm so excited that this awesome thing today was here in this community. Because we're not being open and honest about racism. Two of my very best friends are Americans and her husband in Dayton. When I moved out here, I was so excited about this new pretty house that I built. But for some reason, every invite, they would never come and bring their kids to my house for dinner. And finally, it was like, Apple, tell me, are you mad at me? Why won't you come to dinner at my house? And they said, don't you know black people rule? And I said, no, what? They said, you don't go past Target on Feedwire Road. You don't go between Target and Senior on Feedwire Road. Because we all know family member after family member have gotten picked up by the police there. For us to go to Senior, we'll take the highway, but Jenna, we won't come to your house. And finally, we planned it, and they would come and bring their kids to have dinner at my house in People's Mill on Halloween trick or treat night, because they knew that might be a safe night, and that enough people from other communities were coming into this community. To know that when I first moved here in Bellbrook, or Sugarcreek, the big thing on the issue now was the zoning meetings approving the Muslim community center. Me and everything that went down. And the pastor at the local church here who was sending letters, oh, if we let Muslims move in, they're going to start indoctrinating our students. They're going to be building bombs, there's going to be terrorists. Is anybody from the Muslim community here today? Because they have been nothing but a beautiful and positive, addition, I'm not sure, addition to our community here. And so it's sad to say that George Floyd rally downtown was such a sad, sick thing we had to be there for. But it was such a proud and happy thing to see that in my 20 years here, something positive, some change had been made, that people were coming out for something that wasn't just about themselves, it was about something bigger. So thank you, ladies, for what you're doing. And one last thing, it's upsetting to me that when we go to these community things, Lexi Presnell, beautiful, sweet Lexi, is one of the few students here today who brought your daughter. Why didn't the school district give kids some type of extra credit to come be here today for their community service hours? And my daughter was so happy to study the Civil War because she wanted to bring in her grandfather and her great-great-grandfather's Congressional Medal of Honor and tell the class about him. My daughter and son-in-law were never taught the Civil War in Bellbrook High School. And I asked the high school teacher about it, and he said, because it's not on the Ohio graduation test. No student in Ohio, anywhere in this country, should not have learned about the Civil War.
All right, we're going to do a quick regroup of what we've got left because we want to finish up. The last group to come speak was going to be YS Speaking Up for Justice, but one of their representatives was not able to be here. But we know they are busting it, working hard up there.
Organization, and have been supporting the youth. We kind of have like a intergenerational group there, being that we have like a council of elders, if you will, that support the youth in raising up their voices. They give us the leadership, and we back them as activists in the community that kind of have the history and some ideas on tactics and different kinds of things like that. But the youth leadership that started right after George Floyd was murdered went to college and handed it off to another group of youth. So it's been beautiful to see it evolve.
Good.
Those young people started that first Saturday after he was slain and kept people in the streets and kept a presence every Saturday until November of 2020. Picked it back up in the spring of 2021 and kept the dialogue and activity going and found ways to support individual needs for action. There's a young woman who spoke at one of the rallies that said she went to Greenon and she was being called the N-word in school and the schools weren't being responsive. So just seeing the way that those young people have stepped up to the call and showed us the way and showed us leadership has been powerful and beautiful. I did want to say briefly, I prayed. I came in this driveway. I don't know this area. My grandpa used to drive me around some of these roads, so I had memories of that, but I got deeper and deeper, and I had no clue where I was going today. And my husband asked me, like, are you sure you want to take her? I can take her with me to work, and she can sit in the truck. And I was like, no, she needs to be there, and we'll be fine, and you can go look up the location for where we're going to be. And as I came down the road, I'm going to be real honest, it is very rural, and I look the way I look. And I've been in situations where I look the way I look, and I have not been safe. So because of that, and especially because I had her with me, I just said, we're just going to pray real quick and say that hopefully everything goes well, and hearts and minds are open, and we'll be safe, and everybody will be safe, and we'll go home. To have that awareness is hard, but I'm glad y'all had it here because it made me reach out to this part of Greene County I don't know so well. But I will say having it in places where people feel more safe to come out as communities of color is going to get more support. So we have it in different places, and I get it, but that's I'll stop talking.
Thank you. There's definitely, this is a youth-driven group, which is different from, well, I mean, there's a little youth in there, but I know that's the beauty of that group, and that's would be great to replicate. So I'm throwing out what the rest of the plans were for the afternoon.